Hello friends, welcome to today's daily devotion. I'm reading to you from the Gospel of Matthew, the 11th chapter, starting in verse 2 and reading through verse 11. Hear now these words. When John, who was in prison, heard about the deeds of the Messiah, he sent his disciples to ask him, "Are you the one who is to come, or should we expect someone else?" Jesus replied, "Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. Blessed is anyone who does not stumble on account of me." As John's disciples were leaving, Jesus began to speak to the crowd about John. "What did you go out into the wilderness to see? A reed swayed by the wind? If not, what did you go to see? A man dressed in fine clothes? No, those who wear fine clothes are in kings' palaces. Then what did you go out to see? A prophet? Yes, I tell you, and more than a prophet. This is the one about whom it is written, 'I will send my messenger ahead of you, who will prepare the way before you.' Truly I tell you, among those born of women there has not risen anyone greater than John the Baptist. Yet whoever is least in the kingdom of heaven is greater than he." You may be wondering, what is this passage doing in the middle of the Advent season? For that's where we are. We are smack dab in the middle of our Advent journey from the beginning of December now to the culmination at Christmas. And I think it's an important text for us because this text is dealing with the idea of assumptions and expectations. You see, John is in prison. I'm sure he never expected to be there, but he had been thrown into prison because he was preaching against King Herod and what King Herod was doing in a sexual relationship, and Herod didn't like that, and so to silence his critic, he put John in prison. And now John is sitting there probably with too much time on his hands and not enough to do. And so he starts thinking and he hears about Jesus, and Jesus isn't living up to John's expectations of what the Messiah was supposed to be doing. For you see, in John's mind, he expected Jesus to be busy raising armies and drawing up funds to be able to overthrow the Roman oppressors, and that's not what Jesus was doing. So he sends his own disciples to come to Jesus and find out, "Hey, are you the man, or is there somebody else?" And Jesus replies with, "I'm the man, but not the man you think I am." And that's why he says, here's what's actually happening. Go tell him that. And then Jesus turns and talks to the people and says, "What did you go out to look for when you went out to the wilderness to see John?" And Jesus is challenging their expectations and their assumptions about John and what John's role is. Well, here we are in Advent, and we need to stop and check our own assumptions, our own expectations. Are we worshiping Jesus under Jesus' terms, or are we trying to make Jesus fit into our terms, our expectations, our assumptions? Are you in your life where you expected to be right now, whether in the Christmas preparations or in your life in general? Have you experienced disappointments? Have you experienced frustrations and heartaches and things that seem to have gotten you off your track? And maybe you wonder, God, how could you allow this to happen to me? Well, then you're in the boat with John. Jesus, you're not measuring up to my expectation. So today, let's look again at Jesus and what he says he's doing. He says, "The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor." You see, Jesus' purpose was not to free us from political oppression or from material consumption, but Jesus was instead here to free us from sin and death. And everything else falls in comparison to that. So if you've got things going on in your life, then maybe, just maybe, Jesus is using those things to root out sin. to root out the places that keep you from following Jesus completely and fully. And maybe, just maybe, today is the day to wake up and see Jesus as he is on his terms and not on your own assumptions and expectations. And I'll see you tomorrow for another daily devotion.